Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is a non-stop thrill ride of action, adventure, explosions, war, and deceit. Or to summarize it a different way, it's COD 4 on a week-long cocaine binge. It's no easy task creating a sequel to one of the most revolutionary and critically acclaimed video games of all time, let alone in a franchise that traditionally made standalone games with self-contained stories. Modern Warfare 2, believe it or not, is the first direct sequel in the franchise. And though Modern Warfare is easily the game that started many of the trends we see in first-person shooters today, and really put this series on the map, Modern Warfare 2 cemented many of those trends, and created new ones as well. Call of Duty 4 united a huge fan base together, and naturally hearing that a sequel, once again set in modern times, was planned, people got so excited. How would they improve upon what was basically a masterpiece? Where would they take the story? Would old characters return? What would the multiplayer be like? So many questions. The sales and success of this game speaks for itself, but success doesn't determine quality, and Modern Warfare 2 was the subject of countless debates and controversies, sparking discussion about what's okay to put in a video game and what's not.
A popular new video game actually allows you to be a terrorist and kill people. Take a look.
Despite the critical acclaim of COD 4, Modern Warfare 2 did not receive the same amount of praise. It's a pretty drastic drop in Metacritic score across the board, which I think is an indication that people's feelings towards the series were slowly starting to change. I mean, the franchise had always been about war and soldiers, history, and they were always fun shooters to boot. And it was mostly serious and semi-realistic, or at least it tried to be, in the way it depicted war. But MW2 has a vastly different tone overall, and all you need to do to see that is compare the trailers.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
Our so-called leaders prostituted us to the West, destroyed our culture, our economies, our honor.
This is when Call of Duty really started to appeal to mainstream audiences and develop this gamer dude bro culture that has more or less replaced the series' identity. Yeah, fuck yeah, you got Eminem spitting his lines, action is cut to the beat, it's so fucking cool, and it's a great trailer, gets you hyped up, but it's just not what Call of Duty was at that point. They even went so far as to create this hilarious and cocky commercial that was banned from TV.
Sons of bitches do it so loud they keep up the neighbors. Sometimes my dog likes to watch me do it. Some people go into domination mode, and that's some freaky deaky shit. I've heard there's over 20 million people doing it now, so it's safe to say that everyone is doing it.
I guess everyone really was doing it. It's been over 9 years since the game's release, and in that time, we've seen 9 new Call of Duties. But was there something special within Modern Warfare 2 that the other games didn't capitalize on? Is there still some secret ingredient to the Call of Duty formula hidden away in here? And was the story, campaign, and multiplayer a product of its time that hasn't aged properly? Well, let's whip out our noob tubes, start World War III, and no rushing our way straight into this. At the end of COD 4, Captain Price and Soap McTavish stopped Imran Zakhaev's nuclear missile launch in his attack on the United States. And then they killed the bastard. It was glorious. A fitting end. But the incident was covered up, with the launch being labeled as a missile test by the Russian government, and the heroes who stopped it didn't become heroes in the eyes of the public, which leads us quite nicely into Modern Warfare 2. The story starts off with a spectacular opening credit scene, as dialogue and snapshots from the previous game are played in the background.
What the hell kind of name is Soap?
I think the lime green aesthetic here works well for the art style. You know, makes it feel, what's the word? Modern. Afterwards, this new guy, General Shepard, monologues his thoughts on war, power, and his words carry weight. You can tell he's been through and seen enough shit to know how the cycle goes.
History is written by the victor, and here I am thinking we'd won.
And unfortunately, Imran Zakhaev didn't become an example, he became a martyr to the Russians. The dialogue is pretty well written. It's not trying so hard to be taken seriously that it falls into the pitfall of Destiny, where they say things that sound epic and cool but really make no sense at all. But it's also not a fucking Monty Python skit. A telltale sign of good dialogue is Shepard and the other characters don't always explicitly say what they mean. You know, it leaves things open to interpretation. And in his words lies a small explanation for why the United States invades countries and pokes their noses into the business of others.
We are the most powerful military force in the history of man. Every fight is our fight. Because what happens over here matters over there. We don't get to sit one out.
Within the first few cutscenes, you get the sense that Shepard wants to be a winner. He wants to write his own history. And that desire is what initiates the events of the game. You take control of Private Allen, and as part of the Rangers, you're tasked with retaking a city in Afghanistan. Upon your success, Shepard recruits you into the illustrious Task Force 141, an elite unit under his direct command. Perspectives switch as you are put in the shoes of Roach alongside McTavish, the fucking homeboy and the protagonist from COD 4. And I like this because just like Black Ops 2 from Black Ops 1, you play as Alex Mason and then you play alongside him. So you sneak through a sandstorm to receive an ACS module and then book it the fuck out of there. Makarov is at this point the main villain who's essentially taken up Zakhaev's role as he begins a campaign of terrorism against Europe. Shepard sends Allen on a dangerous, undercover mission, disguised as a terrorist, in order to gain Makarov's trust.
You don't want to know what it's cost already to put you next to him. It will cost you a piece of yourself. It will cost nothing compared to everything you'll save.
Which brings us to one of the most controversial moments in video game history.
Snami Bog. Remember, no Russian.
It's still shocking to play through this level. And whatever you might say about Call of Duty's decline in storytelling, whatever you might say about Modern Warfare 2, you can't tell me it doesn't have balls. This scene in the Russian airport can be viewed in one of two ways. Either it's a desperate attempt to shock the player and create a scene as memorable as the nuke going off in COD 4, or it's the writer's way of showing how a single horrific act can spark a greater war. I think it's a combination of both, and for me, it's hard to ignore the parallels between this and the 9/11 attacks. But no! Contrary to what mainstream media would have you believe in 2009, there's more to this level than just...
John, a lot of people have a problem, though, where you get to essentially be a terrorist and kill people, and it's very realistic. Very realistic. Very realistic. Very realistic.
Violence is a tool for storytelling, just ask George R.R. Martin. And while the delivery is as heavy-handed as Doomfist jacking off, it does its job for the plot. There's no consequence for not shooting the civilians, and the game gives you the option of skipping it entirely. So since Makarov was aware of Alan's identity from the start, it means Shepard essentially sent him off to die. He's the real martyr.
We've sent a strong message with this attack, Makarov.
That was no message. This is a message.
And when the authorities found an American behind this attack, they declared war on the United States without a second of hesitation. Hey, anyone remember the War on Terror? Wasn't that a jolly good time? The thing about Modern Warfare 2 is even though it's not set within a non-fiction timeline, it mimics many of the things that happened in the 8 or so years prior to its release, so it still has a feeling of authenticity. Except for this one very small oversight in logic. You know, something small. The fact that the Russian authorities did absolutely no fucking research and investigation. Yes, Alan was an American. Yes, he may or may not have shot plenty of people, but you'd think the Russian government would at least try and look into the identities of the other 4 shooters before declaring war against the United States, a country they've had extreme animosity with for the last 60 years? Did they just think one guy did all of this? I mean, you guys got security cameras, their faces were probably all over them. Oh, one of these guys was an American and we never saw or heard from the other 4? Well, oh, wait, no, one of them died too, but we never checked into his background or anything. Come on, guys, let's go invade the White House, hooray! I don't know, it's stupid. So Roach and McTavish head to Rio de Janeiro in order to find some evidence that implicates Makarov in the terrorist attack, because none was fucking at the airport itself. You fight through the favela against military forces, and I gotta say, it's cool that they have civilians all over this game. Really makes you feel like shit is going down and there's real people caught in the crossfire. You can't kill them though, it's a damn shame. So you're chasing down this guy Alejandro Rojas and shit, he's gonna get away.
No, he's not.
Oh fuck, he's gonna be feeling that for a while. So at this point the story has split into 2 narratives, which is typical for Call of Duty. On one side we got Sergeant Foley, Private and the American gang defending the mainland from the Russian invasion. And on the other, Soap, Price, and Ghost try to track down Makarov and find evidence to implicate him. You know, maybe it's the inner patriot in me, but it's fucking cool to play as the Americans and fight off the Russians, defending and retaking the White House. Running to the top to light green flares, signaling the jets not to bomb them, and seeing flares spread out across Washington, D.C. Modern Warfare 2 has some real memorable moments and visual imagery. And I like these missions because I kind of imagine it as a what if the Cold War turned into a real war scenario. You know, it'd be pretty terrifying to imagine an invasion on US soil. Of course, the last time that happened, we pushed back those fucking redcoats. Anyways, Task Force 141 infiltrates a gulag in order to free the mysterious entity known as Prisoner 627. Fighting through cell blocks, picking up riot shields, and killing the guards, you and the team wind up at the cell and free who's inside. And guess what? It's John Cena! No, it's Captain Price. Yeah, hell yeah! Real homies squad up! And then the crew raids a Russian port, where they gain control of a submarine. And all's well that ends well, right? Good job, Price. Time to get out of there so we can go home.
Price, do you copy? The silo doors are open!
Price?
I repeat, the silo doors
What you up to down there?
Good.
I'm starting to worry that... Jesus, what are you doing, Matt?
We have a nuclear missile launch! Missile in the air! Missile in the air! Code black! Code black!
In a daring and risky ploy, Price launches a missile headed directly towards DC, and we swap to a space station in orbit, where we see it unfold. I will say, sometimes it's nice to have a cocaine binge from time to time. JK, I don't condone the use of illegal drugs. So the missile ends up being an EMP, which knocks out all electrical equipment, sending helicopters crashing to the ground, cocaine, and fucking up everyone's day. But it gives the Americans enough of an advantage to push through and retake the White House. At the top, Sergeant Foley vows vengeance on the Russians and swears they will burn Moscow to the ground. Foreshadowing? Meanwhile, at Makarov's safe house, Ghost and Roach attempt a daring attack to steal vital intelligence and evidence from Makarov's computer. You breach the estate, set it up for defense, hold the line, and then download the valuable data with the fucking Comcast internet speeds. Come on, man, hurry it up. After it's finished, you book it the fuck out of there, where you're greeted by a friendly face? Timely rescue there, General Shepard. Of course, we got the data for you, and...
What you say? Oh, that you only meant well, 'cause you did.
A most shocking betrayal that feels like it came out of nowhere. A lot of players probably didn't know what to make of this or why Shepard did what he did. So you could criticize it for being contrived and betrayal for the sake of betrayal, but in actuality, there were plenty of warning signs. Shepard had to kill Ghost and Roach because if they uncovered what was on the DSM, it would have revealed his involvement in the terrorist attack on Russia. His whole vision of himself would have been tarnished, and his legacy destroyed. Thus why he says,
"Good, that's one less loose end."
His famous quote essentially sums up his motivations.
5 years ago, I lost 30,000 men in the blink of an eye. And the world just fucking watched.
Losing that many troops in an instant has gotta fuck you up to some degree, especially if you commanded them. But even more so if retribution wasn't taken. Throughout the game, Shepard talks about war heroes, the US being the most powerful military force in human history. He's given everyone a fucking pep talk about greatness all the time. It's like, do you have a hobby, dude? He's essentially deluded himself into thinking winning a war is what makes a person great, what cements them in history. And all the events of this game were orchestrated by Shepard for the sake of his own ego and image.
This is for the record. History is written by the victor. History is filled with liars. If he lives and we die, his truth becomes written and ours is lost. Shepard will be a hero, because all you need to change the world is one good lie and a river of blood.
So now that we know the villain's motivations, it's time to kill his ass. Makarov and Shepard's men fight amongst each other in the boneyard, while Price, Nikolai, and Soap try to regroup to take him down. We infiltrate Shepard's base, kill his soldiers, run after him, and then we get an extremely preposterous boat chase scene, after which Shepard's helicopter is shot down. Boat falls in the water, we wake up in a desert, walk around for a bit, and yo, what's up, dog? You chilling or what? Oh, ow, fuck! A fight breaks out, you get stabbed. Pull that shit out of your stomach, toss it with expert precision, and
mission accomplished. Good work.
it's a pretty cool detail how Rust is in the background in this final scene. So with our enemy defeated, the story wraps up nicely, but you can tell, it's not over yet. Makarov is still out there, and no doubt, he's scheming some treachery already. So overall, the plot is pretty entertaining. It's a fantastic joyride from start to finish. Yet it does suffer from extreme action movie cliches, absurd scenarios, and that unforgivable plot hole I talked about. After beating the campaign, we gain access to the museum, which shows off all the set pieces, characters, and locations we saw and experienced throughout the story. You can even grab a bunch of guns and shoot everyone in here. It's fucking awesome and very creative. The biggest problem with the Modern Warfare 2 campaign is its lack of pacing, and an over-reliance on keeping the action going. In the original game, there were plenty of slow, quiet moments that made the loud combat parts more enjoyable and intense. And while Modern Warfare 2 has you climb a mountain, ride in helicopters, listen to dialogue, and do other things besides shooting, the vast majority of your playtime is spent in firefights. Now, Call of Duty has never been what I'd call realistic, but COD 4 felt more realistic overall. Like, Modern Warfare 2 is basically just one big shooting gallery. This is when the series really started to transform into a balls-to-the-walls power fantasy. And it's pretty clear from behind-the-scenes interviews that the developers wanted the player to feel like a badass.
The thing I think is really unique about the level that we're kind of new to in this game would be going through an environment and having the feeling of early on in the level running to danger and watching all these people run away from it. So you really start to feel like a badass. You're running right to all the fire and the explosions, they're running past you.
Part of the reason why COD 4 and World at War worked so well was the way they built up the action, how each section led to the next. You weren't always just dropped into a massive firefight. Sometimes you'd run across a group of captured German soldiers and you had to decide what to do with them. Or you'd be walking silently through the jungle when all of a sudden... And there was a time you had to grab Captain McMillan and set him down before engaging the enemy. You know, it added pacing and tension. Little things like that could spice up the moments in between the shooting. I think when you have a vehicle escape section and there's like 50 other snowmobiles and you're just mowing them all down with the most accurate Glock 18, it starts to feel less like a war, less like a battle, and you start to feel less like a real soldier. At least with Black Ops 1, it had the same level of over-the-top batshit crazy, but it had a much more coherent, interesting story. The gist of what I'm saying is, compared to its predecessors, Modern Warfare 2's campaign is overindulgent, and too much combat is draining. For example, when you're chasing down Shepard's boat at the end of the game, was it really necessary to have 15 helicopters, 47 boats, 100 foot soldiers spread throughout miles of riverlands, all in the name of stopping 2 guys on a shitty little boat? It's just a clusterfuck, and it doesn't feel right. The scenarios the game puts you in become so ridiculous that suspension of disbelief is no longer possible. Despite all this, I've come to realize through my time playing all these Call of Duty campaigns and reviewing them that each one of them tries something new, and I can really respect that. Cocaine Warfare 2 might be a non-stop adrenaline rush, and it's still fun on its own merits. At least it isn't simply doing the same goddamn thing we've already seen before. I think the problem people have with this campaign is the trends it started for the future. It wouldn't have been so bad if this one iteration strayed from the formula, turned into an action movie and went balls to the walls, and then we kinda came back to earth. But almost every game after this has been just as ridiculous, if not more so. But I do appreciate Modern Warfare 2's commitment to straight up dumb fun. In the tradition of MW2 amping up the action and intensity of the campaign to absurd, earth-shattering levels, the multiplayer does this as well. It should come as no surprise to anyone that's watched my other COD videos that Modern Warfare 2 has my favorite multiplayer in the series. I've sucked this game's cock long enough, it's time to tell you why I love it so much. Well, all I really have to say is, it's a kick-ass game.
Mission accomplished, good work.
Despite what your friends in middle school might have believed, there's more to this game than the 360 no-scope intervention montages. Good lord, Modern Warfare 2 and Halo 3 basically started all these frickin' MLG dank gamer 420 blaze it memes. I think the sheer number of people trying to create badass cool montages and highlight reels says something about how influential the multiplayer was on the gaming community. Way back in, holy shit, 2009? Goddamn, it's been 10 years. Way back when this game came out, I was captivated and addicted to the multiplayer, and it's taken me many videos, hundreds of multiplayer matches, a deep look into the pent-up rage and psychology of 12-year-olds, and about 9 days of playtime to be able to put into words why.
We've taken the lead!
It has to do with the weapons, class customization, progression, kill streaks, music, voice acting, and the most critical aspect of all, map design. But what to start with first? Well, let's whip out our good old ACR and start with the core gameplay. It's a Call of Duty game, so the basic rules should be pretty self-explanatory and I don't need to go over them. Time to kill an MW2 is pretty damn quick, meaning firefights are more a test of quick reflexes, good aim, knowing the maps, weapons, awareness of your surroundings, and minimap. This was the big debate back in the day, and I remember it clearly. Halo 3 is better because it requires more skill. You can't drop people in half a second. Modern Warfare 2 is too easy and chaotic. And while I still think this is true, I have to say that's what I liked about it. Get back! Oh God! You get destroyed, Mo. Fast-paced, easy to pick up and play, pure casual fun, but room for competitive players to take it to the next level. It's classic Call of Duty mayhem at its finest. But why do I find more fun here than in Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, 3, 4, Modern Warfare 3, Ghosts, World at War, or any of the others? The answer lies within the expert map and weapon designs. I'm not sure if there's a term game developers use for this, but the best shooters in my opinion are the ones where every weapon has a place in the sandbox, where everything is viable to a certain degree, so that nothing in the game is wasted or repeated. What do I mean by that? Well, take Halo 5 for example. With all the wrecks they added, inevitably they just made a fuck ton of reskinned weapons and vehicles. And while yeah, there's a lot of tools to play around with, too much of it just feels the same. It's redundant. But in Modern Warfare 2, everything fulfills a role. Equipment, for example. A tactical insertion allows you to choose your next spawn, which in and of itself offers a multitude of possibilities. Claymores are used to watch your back. You can put them in high traffic areas. Throwing knives are for players who want a more stealthy approach or just want to get some sick highlight clips. Now, of course, some weapons and equipment are objectively worse choices than others, but a big part of it does come down to preference. Personally, I love the F2000. It's a spray and pray gun with little damage, high recoil, looks wacky as shit, and nobody uses it. The blast shield isn't used either because it cuts your vision and radar, but if you hate danger close, you might consider using it. I could run through each and every weapon and discuss their minor differences in performance and reliability where they shine best, but as an old black woman once said, ain't nobody got time for that. So I'll just pick a handful to reinforce my points. The FAMAS excels in mid to long range encounters and has a 3-burst shot. The Scar H is a high damage, high accuracy weapon with the shortest magazine. TAR-21 is a close to medium range weapon that can more or less function as a hybrid assault rifle / SMG. UMP-45 is the opposite, an SMG with some assault rifle characteristics. The L-86 is a high damage, high recoil LMG that can be surprisingly accurate with quick trigger pulls. The AUG H-Bar is an LMG with a clip size slightly higher than most assault rifles but lower than all the other LMGs. The weapons I chose all represent a different archetype and playstyle, and any guns that are similar will pretty much always have certain strengths and weaknesses over others. If you want an informative guide on each one of these guns, Xbox Ahoy has a complete series on it, and to me that goes to show how much depth the sandbox has overall. And when the sandbox has depth, so do the player's choice of loadout. This is why I and many others spent countless hours fine-tuning their classes, because the decisions really mattered. You would discover a playstyle, unlock the attachments, fiddle around and try different combinations, level up, get the perks that worked best, unlock pro perks, etc. The game's addicting progression and leveling system went hand in hand with its diverse set of weapons and customization. My gripes with some of the newer Call of Duties is they streamlined the weapon categories. Where Modern Warfare 2 offered 4 to 10 guns in each category, newer games would have 1 to 3. And with the Pick 10 system, most players don't even bother with a secondary. So it's almost like what's the point of even having them? But one of the necessary elements of COD multiplayer the developers need to get right is the perks. Modern Warfare 2 is by no means a perfect game, but unlike Black Ops 4, the perks here are vastly important to your class setup. You know, Sleight of Hand will give you a speed advantage in firefights, but without Scavenger you could find yourself running out of ammo quickly. In this game, Scavenger is actually a useful perk, because not everyone starts with 6 full magazines. If you want a more mobile class, taking Marathon will help with that, and if you rock Bling, you can cover your weapon's weaknesses more thoroughly. Stopping power helps increase time to kill and damage with most weapons, but for some it's not essential. Hardline isn't all that good because you'd rather have a better, more effective class than require 1 less kill to get a streak going. Cold-Blooded is perfect for stealth and Danger Close is the go-to for explosive-based classes. Lightweight makes you more nimble, which is great for close quarters. Finally, with the yellow perks, yes, you can run around with Commando and a tactical knife. It can be really fun, but it's not too viable. Steady Aim is great for snipers or akimbo weapons. Scrambler is borderline useless and gives away your position. And Ninja is just the best, works on every class. Sitrep is great for finding claymores and tactical insertions, and Last Stand is if you want to be an annoying bitch. What makes the class customization so dynamic is the clear benefits and trade-offs of taking one perk over another. If the trade-offs aren't significant, if you can have a good class without any perks, then it's kind of like, why are they there? And if you're questioning the point of taking perks at all, then maybe that part of the game isn't designed well. Yes, there are some frustrating elements in this game. How could we forget one-man army, danger close noob tube spam? One-man army was fucking broken. But you know what was worse than all that? The Model 1887s. Thank God this shit was patched, but let us never forget. To summarize, the class customization here is as perfect as it's ever been or going to be in Call of Duty. It wasn't balanced, fuck no. But in terms of options, viability, fun factor, the sandbox is the most complete out of all the COD games in my opinion. Get your goddamn helicopter.
I just got guys, I think this game is over. Happy birthday.
It's never.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
No, what you talking about?
It's never.
If everybody rage quit, I'll kill myself before I die. Now let's switch gears and talk about the Killstreaks. It was a huge change of pace for Call of Duty to leave World War II behind and head into modern territory. COD 4 and World at War had the same exact system when it came to Killstreaks, and it worked just fine. 3 kills for a recon plane, 5 for an airstrike, and 7 for an AI-controlled ally. Easy, straightforward, and even. But when Modern Warfare 2 came out, it turned this simple formula into emergency airdrop on the fucking way! Chopper gunner ready to blow shit up! EMP ready for launch, fuck their electronics! And then you start thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I didn't do any drugs this morning. And just when you thought the game couldn't get any more batshit insane, our Lord and Savior Ghost descended from the heavens to tell us the sacred words.
Tactical nuke ready for launch.
And so it was, that the face of gaming was forever changed, and the land of memes would never be the same. Let me just say that the voice acting for the different factions and announcers is what gives this game so much character. It gives it an identity. Just fucking listen to these announcers.
We've lost the lead!
Predator missile ready for launch. Repeat, Predator missile ready for launch.
The ball has been planted!
Show us where you want it.
Enemy nuke incoming! It's over!
I don't think I've heard anything past Advanced Warfare that was any bit as memorable as some of these lines. Just listen to the intensity.
Enemy AC-130 above! Enemy AC-130 above! Enemy AC-130 above!
Now let me get one thing out of the way real quick. Modern Warfare 2 is not meant to be balanced. It's meant to be stupid, chaotic fun. This means you can have an absolutely great time when you're fucking shit up, and you can also have a terrible time when you're getting ass blasted. It's a tough dichotomy, but that's what the game excels at. And what's a good Call of Duty game without the kill streaks? The variety is astounding, and they could be the best innovation made from the original to the sequel. Of course, you've got your UAVs, airstrikes, and attack helicopters from COD 4, but fun fact, unlike COD 4, you can actually shoot down the UAVs. Then there's counter UAVs, which add some much needed disruption to the game. Care packages drop a random kill streak with varying drop rates. You can call down sentry guns, set them up in defensive or offensive positions. There's the godforsaken Predator missile, which the enemy always seems to get when you're about to get your Harriers, which incidentally is the best kill streak in the game, bang for buck. Which means they should have made the precision airstrike 5 kills because there's no reason to pick it over the Harriers. And without a doubt, the most fun kill streak in Call of Duty history, the emergency fucking airdrop. You know why I love it so much? Because not only do you get 4 random kill streaks falling from the heavens, not only can you get a chopper gunner and an AC-130 in the same drop, but it creates this mad dash in the match, where your team is running to secure them and back you up, and the enemies are trying to steal them. It's glorious. On the higher end, you got the Pavlo, which is an absolute beast in the skies. The stealth bomber is very underwhelming for the 9 kills it takes to get it, but hey, that's why we have care packages. The monstrous chopper gunner and AC-130 are the most extreme power fantasies come true, and if you see one on the enemy team, it's a sign that someone needs to be killed. Cause no, they're not going for the EMP. They're going for the... This game had huge balls in how overpowered and busted they made the kill streaks, and that's why I love them. However, the ridiculous aspect comes at the cost of a fatal flaw, which has since been rectified with score streaks. You get fucking campers like there's no tomorrow, because everyone wants to get a nuke, everyone wants that badass feeling. And for a lot of players, myself included, the game becomes less about winning and more about getting kills, no matter the game mode. This isn't something that ruins the experience, it just has the potential for players to abuse it, which they most certainly do. But in the end, the game is better off because of the kill streaks, even if it's frustrating to die by them over and over. Because you can always bring that same retribution to the feet of your enemies.
No, thanks.
Got a little present for you.
Oh my god.
What is it that makes a good map in a multiplayer game? This question alone could be its own video, and varies from shooter to shooter. What you have to ask yourself is this: why does a level like High Rise stand out so much more than a level like generic Factory number 27? Well, there's plenty of reasons, and one of the most glaring is the overall selection a game offers. If nearly every map you have falls under the umbrella of flat, small, linear 3-lane design, then every multiplayer match is going to feel the same. This is the biggest issue with having fun in modern Call of Duty games. The map design is so safe, predictable, and boring that it's just not exciting. You already know what you're gonna play before you pop the game in. In my Black Ops 4 review, I talked about streamlining and how the maps heavily restrict player freedom, and I compared it to Quarry, where you were able to jump, climb, and run around all the boxed areas. Which brings up my first point. A good map needs a unique aesthetic. A desert surrounded by a crashed airplane split into fragments. Unique. A train wreck in a snowy environment with boxcars strewn about in a chaotic mess. Unique. A series of interconnected buildings and houses within the alleyways of Brazil. Unique. Atop the roof of a skyscraper surrounded by buildings and a helicopter pad. Unique. Oftentimes, the simplest idea of what a map is, where it's located, and the aesthetic can make it stick in your brain. It makes it memorable. I find myself not being able to remember the names of most of the newer maps because they just aren't memorable. Especially if you're making a game based on war, well, you're probably gonna fight in some locations that are fucked up and a bit destroyed. If you look at Black Ops 3 and 4, most of the environments are totally clean and sterile, like it's a fucking simulation or something.
Just like the simulation.
So now that we understand a map needs a unique identity, it's time to flesh this out. Point number 2. A good map needs a variety of terrain. In order to give players interesting choices throughout a match, there needs to be an interesting design. So if you ever want your audience to want to play your maps hundreds of times without going insane, well, it's gonna get real fucking old real fucking quick when your options boil down to pick a number between 1 and 3. But when you start incorporating things like strategic cover, high ground, low ground, hills, slopes, ladders, bunkers, underground areas, buildings, debris, interactivity, then you start to create interesting ways to attack, defend, and traverse the map. And better yet, you create power positions. Areas where players can have fortified positions or a great view of the map, control of a choke point, for example, the hallway on Skid Row. A good map needs interesting landmarks, points of interest that stand out and draw player attention, so you know where you are on the map in relation to these landmarks. The house on Estate, for example, the downed plane on Afghan, or the cockpit in Terminal. Verticality is a big part of this too. There is no map in COD World War II or an original map in Black Ops 4 that offers 3 story heights. None. So when you have no height differential, suddenly all your maps feel flat and lifeless. If you took the map Wasteland and set up a bunch of walls to trap players into going down certain paths, without this wide open freedom, you'd have a Black Ops 4 map. Favela might look small on paper when you draw it out, but when you play it, there's all sorts of buildings you can go through, different ways you can get to the top. It looks like a 3-lane map, but it's far more dynamic and interesting than that. And my third point, a good map needs flow. How does a player move from one area to another? At any one spot in the map, what options and routes can a player take? Can you predict where the enemy will spawn? Will the enemy spawn right up in your butthole? A map with good flow is a map that players can learn. That's why you see people at the start of a match launch a noob tube at a seemingly random point in the air, because they know how far it's going to travel and where the enemy is going to be. You probably noticed plenty of areas in Modern Warfare 2 where there isn't much action going on, where players rarely go. I call these safe spaces. And it helps with flow because unless there's a chopper gunner or AC-130 in the air, it gives each player a fair chance at taking in their surroundings, respawning, formulating a plan of attack. Good flow consists of multiple paths, so for example on Scrapyard you can run outside of the destroyed planes, you can run inside of them, and you can hop through the windows to get in or out. That's good flow. A map that has good flow means that after playing it enough times, you get an idea of where you're most likely to encounter an enemy. And this ties into risk-reward. The reward of running the gauntlet on High Rise is you get to the highest point with the best view. The risk is you're wide open while you run it. The reward of climbing the ladder to the top of Quarry is again a great view. But the risk is you can get shot all the way from below. Maybe there's a path through the map that can get you to the objective quicker, but leaves you more open than running around and flanking. Risk-reward, good flow, both essential to an enjoyable multiplayer. And my final point, a good map must be in tune with the sandbox. Call of Duty has more of an issue with this than, say, Halo, because the weapons are found on the map in certain locations, so the developers can pick and choose what goes where and if this weapon belongs on the map, and if it doesn't, they can just take it out. But since COD allows every weapon on every map, then it's reasonable to expect that most weapons should function and be viable on most maps. Again, a huge oversight by the developers of COD World War II and Black Ops 4. There's just no room for sniping. A sniper is supposed to be able to find a comfortable spot to take out their enemies from afar, but you'll never find a comfortable spot because the sight lines are so short, the maps are so small, and the spawns are so terrible. Simply put, Modern Warfare 2's weapons fit in the maps. They work, and you don't have to avoid an entire category of weapons just because the map designers were lazy as balls. In essence, every level in Modern Warfare 2 adheres to these points. Those are its key strengths. The maps are interesting, different, and fun to play, with the possible exception of Derail. Personally, I just think it's too big and there's too much running around. But it's still unique and I respect it. Now doesn't that say something? The one map most people don't like still has something different to offer from the others. Modern Warfare 2 takes risks. It gives players a lot of freedom in how they move around and what class they choose, and the map design is one of the core reasons I found enough enjoyment in the multiplayer to put 9 days of my life into it. In order to compete with World at War's fantastic and addicting Nazi Zombies mode, Infinity Ward needed to bring something equally as interesting to the table. They couldn't just copy Treyarch, partially because it was called Nazi Zombies at the time. And well, there ain't no Nazis here. While Spec Ops wasn't as widely acclaimed as Zombies or offered as much replay value, it still had its place. The multiplayer always had its claws dug so deep into me that I didn't spend much time in Spec Ops. But that said, having revisited it, it's a welcome addition. The mode consists of 23 separate missions, some of which can be completed in less than a minute and others that take longer. As you finish each level, you'll earn stars, and with those stars, unlock more missions. However, it's not a simple task of getting from point A to point B at your leisure. You often have to deal with the clock, and it soon becomes a race of perfection. The drive to earn 3 stars on every mission is an enticing one, and it's something I've been pursuing not just for the sake of this review, but because I want to. Unfortunately, many of the Spec Ops missions are simply reused areas from the multiplayer and campaign, which means you're more or less seeing the same damn thing from mode to mode. But I'd rather have this mode with recycled areas than not have it at all. Some missions are co-op only and will force one player to man the skies in an AC-130 while the other moves on the ground, bobbing and weaving through buildings as your ally frantically tries to cover you. Hey, ow, shit, man, danger close! There's a wide assortment of missions and they're all pretty great. You know, not too much to say about this mode. Overall, Spec Ops is decent fun. It's nice to have something that caters more to the PvE crowd, and it fits in nicely with the rest of the content. It's a great way to take a break and just chill out. And even though it needed to be fleshed out a lot more, it was a great stepping stone to Modern Warfare 3's take on Spec Ops. Despite the controversial No Russian mission, an unbalanced but fun multiplayer, a side mode that fails to replicate the replayability and fun of Nazi Zombies, Modern Warfare 2 is still a great-ass game. It may not have lived up to people's expectations, but for many of us, this was the moment we became Call of Duty fans. Spec Ops has its moments and it's a nice change of pace, especially if you have a buddy to play with. The single-player campaign might be a clusterfuck of adrenaline, cocaine, and over-the-top action set pieces, but it's still entertaining and has a great story with memorable characters and moments. Multiplayer, on the other hand, is what I picture when I think of the perfect Call of Duty multiplayer. The weapons, class customization, progression, map selection, map design, attachments, perks, equipment. It's my favorite multiplayer offering in the whole series, and you can probably gather that much from the sheer amount of time I spent talking about it. Though Modern Warfare 2 may have started several of the bad and tired trends we've come to loathe from this series, it's given me far more memories and good times than I care to count. And that is why Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was so awesome.
That's how it's done. Nice job, Rangers.